Lydia sat on the edge of her hospital bed, staring at her phone with trembling hands. Her surgery was scheduled for the morning, and her heart pounded like a drum. She had called her parents hours ago, hoping they would step in to help with her twins, Emma and Oliver, who were only 3 years old. She had imagined her mother fussing over them, her father entertaining them with stories or silly games. But so far, there had only been silence. Every unanswered ring made her chest tighten a little more. Finally, her father picked up, and his voice was calm, but it carried a sharpness that made Lydia flinch. "Lydia, what do you want?" he asked, almost impatiently. Her voice caught in her throat. I need you and Mom to watch the twins while I'm in surgery. I don't have anyone else." There was a long pause on the other end, one that made her stomach twist. "Honestly, Lydia," her father said slowly, "you always ask too much. Sometimes, I think you make things harder than they need to be. You're a burden, you know that?" The words hit her like ice water. She sank further into the hospital chair, trying not to cry in the stark white room. She had hoped for understanding, even a small nod of support, but instead she felt the sharp sting of rejection. Her mother's voice came next, warm and cheerful, almost as if she were discussing the weather. "Oh, Lydia," her mother said, "we've already bought tickets for that concert tonight. It's going to be amazing. You'll be fine. The twins are resilient." Lydia blinked, unable to believe what she was hearing. "Wait, you're leaving?" "Tonight, I have surgery. They need someone to be with them." Isa mother's laugh was light, careless. "We've planned this for months, Lydia. You're going to be okay. Stop worrying so much. You need to rest." Before Lydia could respond, the line went dead. She sat in silence, her hands shaking, staring at the phone. Her parents, the people she had always thought she could rely on, had chosen a concert over her and her children. She felt abandoned, small, and completely alone. Her thoughts immediately went to Emma and Oliver. The twins were playing quietly with their stuffed animals on the floor, unaware of the storm raging in their mother's heart. Lydia's chest ached at the sight. They had been her entire world from the moment they were born. And the thought of leaving them with strangers while she underwent surgery made her stomach churn. She had never imagined her parents could be so indifferent, so unkind. She knelt down beside them, brushing a strand of hair from Emma's face. "Mommy has to go to the hospital for a little while," she said softly. "I'll be back soon, I promise. You and Oliver be good, okay?" Oliver looked up at her with wide, trusting eyes, his small hand reaching for hers. "Mommy, don't go," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lydia's throat tightened, and she forced a smile. "I have to, sweetheart. But I'll be back before you know it. I love you both so much." She kissed their foreheads and tried to hold herself together as she packed a small bag for the hospital. Every step toward the car felt heavier than the last. The world outside was bright and busy, cars rushing past, people walking without a care in the world, while Lydia felt trapped in a bubble of fear and loneliness. At the hospital, the waiting room was full of anxious patients and quiet chatter. Lydia's thoughts kept returning to her parents, to the casual way they had dismissed her plea for help. She imagined them at the concert, laughing and taking pictures, completely unaware of the tiny dramas of her life. Her chest ached with a mix of anger and sorrow. She had never felt so small, so unimportant. When the nurse called her name, Lydia's legs felt like lead as she walked toward the operating room. She tried to push her fears aside, tried to focus on the twins, on the thought that soon she would be back in their arms. But every step was heavy with dread. What if something went wrong? Who would be there for her children if she didn't make it through? She laid down on the gurney, the cold metal beneath her making her shiver. The anesthesiologist's voice was calm and professional, explaining the procedure and the medications she would receive. Lydia nodded absently, her mind spinning with thoughts of Emma and Oliver, imagining their little faces, their tiny hands clutching her own. Tears pricked her eyes as she whispered, "Please let me be okay. Please let them be okay." As the anesthesia began to take effect, Lydia felt the edges of consciousness blur. She thought of the concert, of her parents dancing and cheering while she faced uncertainty alone. The unfairness of it all burned inside her like a quiet fire. She had always been a devoted daughter, always had been there for them. And yet now, when she needed them most, they were gone. And then her thoughts shifted. She imagined the twins playing together, their laughter echoing through the apartment, their innocence untouched by the cruelty of adults. She realized that even though her parents had abandoned her, she still had the most important thing in her life, her children. Emma and Oliver were her world, and they depended on her strength. The thought gave her a small, fragile hope. Maybe she could do this on her own. Maybe she didn't need her parents' approval or support to survive. She could be everything for her children, even if the people who were supposed to care the most couldn't be bothered. The world faded into darkness as the anesthesia took hold. But her last conscious thought was of the twins. She pictured their tiny faces, their innocent smiles, and whispered a promise she meant to keep. She would come back to them, stronger than ever. When she drifted off to sleep, Lydia didn't know what awaited her on the other side of surgery. She only knew that the pain of being abandoned by the people who were supposed to love her would linger. But beneath that pain, a quiet resolve had begun to grow. She would survive this, not just for herself, but for Emma and Oliver. She would face the world alone if she had to. And she would prove that love and determination could outweigh neglect and indifference. Even in her unconscious state, Lydia's heart was racing with thoughts of what the future could hold. She imagined days where she and the twins could laugh freely, unburdened by disappointment. She imagined nights where she would hold them close and feel their tiny hands grasping hers in trust. She imagined a life built entirely on love, a life where no one would ever call her a burden again, somewhere deep in her subconscious. A quiet fire of determination began to burn. She couldn't change her parents, couldn't force them to care. But she could protect her children, and in doing so, she could reclaim a part of herself that she had almost lost. The thought was comforting. It's a small light in the darkness of the hospital room, as the surgical team prepared for the procedure. Lydia's breathing slowed. Her thoughts focused entirely on the twins. She imagined Emma's laugh, high and musical, and Oliver's curious eyes following her every move. She imagined their tiny arms wrapped around her neck when she returned, their voices saying, "Mommy, you're back." And in that image, she found a strange sort of peace, even though her parents had failed her. Even though they had chosen a concert over their grandchildren, Lydia realized she was not alone. She had the twins, and they had her. That bond was unbreakable, stronger than anything else in her life. And as her eyelids grew heavy and the world dissolved into the haze of anesthesia, she made a silent vow, no matter what, she would come back to them. And she would build a life filled with love, warmth, and unshakable devotion, even if her heart ached with the sting of rejection. Lydia knew one thing with certainty: she was not defined by the neglect of others. She was defined by her love, her courage, and her unyielding determination to protect the two most precious lives in the world. And with that thought, she surrendered herself to the sleep that would carry her through surgery, holding on to the hope that her family, her real family, was waiting for her on the other side. When Lydia woke, the room was quiet except for the low hum of the machines beside her bed. Her surgery had gone smoothly, but the relief she felt was tinged with exhaustion and lingering fear. Her eyelids felt heavy, her body sore, and her mind raced as she remembered the call from her parents. The words burden and the casual dismissal haunted her still. She could feel the ache of disappointment gnawing at her heart, but most of all, she longed to see her twins, Emma and Oliver. Their little faces, their tiny hands, the way they looked at her with trust and love, it was all she could think about. The hospital staff had been kind, but no one could replace that connection. Lydia forced herself upright, wincing at the soreness in her body. She needed to see them, to know they were safe. She asked the nurse if she could visit the children. The nurse, a young woman with a gentle smile, nodded. "Of course. The babysitter brought them here while you were in surgery. They've been waiting patiently." Lydia's heart leaped at the thought. She hadn't expected her parents to come, and in a way, The idea of seeing her children without them made the reunion more intimate, more hers. The babysitter, a kind woman named Claire, led Lydia to a small room where the twins were playing with building blocks. Emma looked up first, her eyes widening, and then Oliver followed, clutching his favorite stuffed rabbit. "Mommy?" They cried together, rushing forward. Lydia's arms opened instinctively, and she scooped them both up. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she held them close, inhaling their scent, feeling the warmth of their tiny bodies against her own. "I missed you so much," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Emma buried her face in Lydia's shoulder. "We were scared," she murmured. "I know, my loves. I'm so sorry you had to be with someone else." "Mommy had to go to the hospital, but I'm here now," Lydia said, rocking them gently. Her heart was full of relief, of gratitude, and a fierce determination. She would never let anything separate them like this again. As she settled into a chair with the twins on her lap, she asked Claire how they had been. The babysitter explained that the children had been perfectly behaved, but there had been moments when they missed their mother terribly. Lydia nodded, understanding completely. Even though Claire had done her best, it was clear that nothing could replace a mother's presence. Once the twins were fed and tucked into a small nap, Lydia allowed herself a moment to reflect. She pulled out her phone and, with hesitant fingers, scrolled through her parents' social media. Pictures of the concert flashed across the screen. They were laughing, dancing, and enjoying themselves, oblivious to the turmoil Lydia had endured. Her chest tightened, and she felt a mixture of anger and sadness. How could they choose pleasure over family, over their grandchildren, over her in a moment of real need? But as the initial sting of betrayal faded, Lydia felt a different emotion take root: resolve. She realized that while her parents had chosen not to be there, she still had the power to shape her family. She had Emma and Oliver, and that was enough. They didn't need the approval or support of people who didn't understand the weight of love and responsibility. She could be their everything. And that realization gave her a strength she hadn't known she possessed. The days after her surgery were filled with recovery, small triumphs, and quiet moments of bonding. Lydia learned to navigate her limitations, relying on patience and creativity to keep the twins happy and engaged. She set up little games in the living room, read them stories until their eyes grew heavy, and watched as they slept safely, knowing they were loved and protected. Each time she looked at them, she felt a surge of pride and fierce devotion. They were hers, and nothing could take that away. Despite the calm in her home, Lydia's mind still drifted to her parents. She wondered if they would ever realize the depth of what they had done, if they would understand the pain of choosing a concert over family. Part of her wanted confrontation, a moment to express the hurt she carried. But another part of her understood that she didn't need their recognition to validate her worth. She was enough for her children. She was strong enough to move forward no matter what. One afternoon, as she watched the twins play in the sunlight streaming through the window, Lydia felt a quiet longing for love beyond her children. She thought about the kind of person who would never leave, who would stand by her in moments of need, who would hold her hand and share the burdens of life without complaint. It was a subtle, growing desire, a seed of hope that maybe, someday, she could find someone who would cherish not just her, but the family she had built. The weeks passed, and Lydia found a rhythm in her life. Recovery continued, and the bond between her and the twins deepened. Emma began to show off little accomplishments, like drawing shapes and recognizing letters, while Oliver learned to stack blocks higher and higher, his laughter filling the apartment. Lydia felt a quiet triumph in these moments, the joy of small victories that no one could take away. And yet she couldn't ignore the shadow of her parents' absence. Occasionally, she would see a concert advertisement, social media post, or even a song on the radio that reminded her of that day. The memory stung, a persistent reminder of rejection. But each time, Lydia pushed it aside, focusing instead on what mattered most: the present, her children, and the family she was determined to nurture. One evening, after the twins had gone to bed, Lydia sat quietly with a cup of tea, reflecting on how far she had come. The house was still, the soft hum of the heater, a comforting background noise. She realized that the pain she had felt wasn't just about being abandoned. It was about the recognition that sometimes the people who should be there are not. Life could be unfair, people could be selfish, and yet love could still thrive. She had seen it in Emma's eyes, in Oliver's laughter, and in the quiet resilience of her own heart. As she contemplated the future, Lydia made a decision. She would not let her parents' neglect define her. She would create a home where love, care, and support were constants. She would surround herself with people who chose her, who chose her family, and who understood that love was a responsibility, not a convenience. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Claire, the babysitter, coming to return some of the children's toys she had borrowed during the hospital stay. Lydia thanked her and smiled, realizing that support could come from unexpected places. It didn't have to come from her parents. There were people in her life who genuinely cared and were willing to help. That thought warmed her heart. As the night deepened and the apartment grew quiet, Lydia tucked herself into bed, feeling the weight of the day and the weeks behind her. She thought of the twins sleeping peacefully in the next room, of the little life she had rebuilt after betrayal, and of the love that had grown stronger despite the absence of those who should have been there. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of peace, knowing that she was capable of carrying this family forward, no matter the obstacles. In those quiet hours, Lydia dreamed not of the parents who had let her down, but of a future filled with warmth, romance, and steadfast love. She imagined a life where she met someone who would stand by her, someone who would embrace not only her but the family she had fought so hard to protect. She imagined laughter filling her home, hands intertwined with hers, and hearts united by choice and care rather than obligation. And as dawn approached, casting golden light across her bedroom, Lydia felt a quiet triumph. She had faced neglect and disappointment and emerged stronger. She had survived the surgery, cared for her children, and begun to imagine a life defined not by abandonment, but by the love she gave and received. She realized that sometimes the heartbreaks we endure are the catalysts for the family and the life we truly deserve. With a deep breath, Lydia closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of hope settle in her chest. She had her twins, she had love, and she had a resolve that no one could shake. And as she drifted into a peaceful sleep, she carried with her the knowledge that her family, her real, chosen family, was thriving, and that the future, though uncertain, held the promise of joy, loyalty, and the kind of love that could withstand any storm.